My name is Angie Tucker, and I am a board member of Revelation Gardens. And Revelation Gardens is a Benton County nonprofit working to reduce the number of pets in our community. We've started a weekly podcast on Sundays at 2 to talk about all things related to pets. Today's topic is a book talk about Lily and the Octopus. Before we jump in, I'd like to remind you of our founding scripture, Revelations 21:4. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. That right there is very important in this book. It goes with it really well. Today, it's a little bit different because I am having a book talk with a friend of mine. She's in California. It's Joann AuBuchon Lane, but she's married to, what's his first name?
Randy.
She's married to Randy Lane, who's Ron Lane's brother. So she's got a connection down here, and her kids live down here and stuff too. And she's a teacher at the Muse School in, it's not Los Angeles, Calumet.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about 30 minutes from Los Angeles.
But she's going to try to come back home, we hope. Anyway, so the first thing I wanted to do before we got into questions and stuff is, as a whole, I'm choosing books for our book talks that have a animal or a pet in some way as a main character, and very much so this book has an animal as the main character. So I wanted to talk to you first about what did you think about Lily as the main character? So I'm going to tell, I love Lily. Lily is a Dachshund, and Lily has a certain personality, and she's when she gets really excited, the way he writes her dialogue is hilarious. And of course, to me, it was kind of, she wasn't really talking. It's how we make our animals and our pets talk to us. When I look at Yoda and Vader and they talk to me. And so every time she got excited, every word was completely capitalized, and every word had an exclamation point at the end. Like, oh my goodness, you are my owner. There is an ocean. It is beautiful. You know, just everything. And so I loved her personality through her dialogue.
I did too. And you know, you were asking about Lily. See, my mom had a dachshund. Like, we grew up with, his name was Lowboy. So I was really able to connect with her anatomy and everything. You know, what you're talking about, the way she talked, I always had it in my mind when I was reading her, like going, you know,
that's right. Yeah.
So good the way he did that. I don't know how he came up with that, except that it was brilliant. And the other thing I loved about Lily is when he wrote her, she was always the same personality. Like, he really, really captured her. You know, I just felt like every time she talked, it would be the way she would talk.
Yes, yes. And that's what I loved about this book. For our this podcast has a new name, and it's called Our Weekly Pause, which I think is so cool, because it's like we're pausing to think about our pets and our animals and stuff like that. And plus it's a pause like animals. But she is very much a main character without being like she's not anthropomorphized completely. It's more like how a dog would really think or act, I think, because he asked her one time, what does he calls her all kinds of cute names, yeah, the whole list of cute names. There's a whole chapter that's just her list of cute names, and he goes, what do you call me? And she says, that guy.
Oh, but didn't she at one point says, doesn't she say something about but dad?
Yes, and then the end of that chapter, they do something fun, and she says, sometimes I think of you as dad, and it made him cry. And of course, that's it was so funny, because he said that was her personality, that of course she would think of him as that guy, because she saw love in a different way than language than we did. And but at the end, she did think of him as dad. So that was so sweet.
It was so sweet. Um, Also, I don't, right now I don't have a dog, and it makes me very, very sad, but that'll change soon. But I have had so many, and many of them I went through their whole life, like you, with them until the very end. And I can think of a couple where the conversation between our eyes
Hmm.
was real. I mean, it was real. I'm thinking of
Hmm.
Joe in particular, my little silky terrier, but he used to come and sit right in front of me wherever I was sitting and put one paw on my foot. And then he would just stare at me. And,
Hmm.
we had these like little conversations, and that it sounds crazy, but it wasn't. It was real.
Hmm. Right. It was, we were communicating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love this book for that. And, sometimes I think there's a whole lot of people in the world that totally understand this about pets, but there's some who don't. Well, this guy does. This guy totally does. And so one of the things about this book is about that process of going with a pet for all those years that we have them. And so one of his first experiences where she might have been hurt, I think she couldn't walk and they had to take her, and that was, Dachshunds have that problem with their spine and stuff, and she couldn't walk, and he had to leave her and go to his sister's wedding.
Yeah.
And people often will say to us, that's just a dog, or of course you're going to go to your sister's wedding even though your dog's having surgery, because that's your sister's wedding. That's just a dog, right? But he handled that really well. His family really understood how he felt about his pets, don't you think?
Yes. And his relationship with his mom wasn't great.
Mm-hmm.
She said, I sent a check. It was all I could afford to go
Mm-hmm.
toward Lily's surgery. That was a very sweet,
Yeah.
very
Yes.
sweet moment.
Yes. And his relationships with all those family members was all fascinating. It was so real. It was so good. Yeah.
There's a lot to like about the book. Lowboy, the little dachshund that my mom and dad had for so many years, he had the exact same thing. He had a vertebrae in his back, and they had to make that decision. So it was bringing it all back to me as I was reading it. But they had to decide. They spent thousands of dollars
Yes.
on
Yes.
his spine,
Yeah.
but there wasn't. They didn't even consider not doing it. He wasn't
Right.
that old, and and it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah. Yeah. And it worked for Lily too.
Yeah.
But so our big connection to this Revelation Gardens too, though, is this is a story, to me, it was so much about grief. And like, he used an animal to show that, but any grief, anybody who's had any kind of grief could relate to so many of the things he was doing. And that in denial, the first one about when we have a bad thing happen. And so he never called. He looked at Lily, the first chapter, and he saw an octopus on her head.
Yeah.
We all know he didn't mean an octopus. It's a tumor.
Yeah.
But he never calls it a tumor throughout the whole book until the very end. He calls it an octopus.
Yeah.
And even when his friends or his family would say something about, well, the two, and he'd stop them before they ever got the word out. Even the vet, he said, it's an octopus. And she said, well, no, it's an octopus. And she said, okay, it's an octopus, yeah. And so the first thing he had was denial. And he denied for a long, long time. But do you want to add anything to that?
No, it's just that it worked. I mean, when at the beginning of the book, I was holding back a little bit and saying, okay, where are you taking us? This is but it really did work. As I continued on that journey, I totally got that denial. Totally got it. Not just in reference to a pet that's sick or a person, but just things that you just don't want to face. That denial, that putting it in a different compartment, I thought it did work after a while. I was okay with it. But at the beginning, he's asking a lot of the reader.
Yeah.
He is throughout the whole book, you know, which I found fascinating too. But yeah, that denial was very real.
Yeah, one of the first texts you sent me was, "This is weird," you know, and I was like, I hope she likes it. But there was only one part I didn't like.
Okay.
And that was the Moby Dick part. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Of course.
Did you love that part?
Well, I'll tell you, I went through stages. And I came out, okay, so that's really interesting because I would have guessed that you would have loved that part.
Well, so what to me, it becomes too not real. Of course, so what happens is he goes on the hunt for the octopus, just like Sinbad, Ahab goes on the hunt for the whale. And I knew it wasn't real, you know, and I knew, and so there was a part of me that didn't like it as much for some reason. I don't know if which is funny in it, because I love fantasy, and I want to write fantasy with animals in it. And I liked her real so much more, you know, sitting on Thursday afternoons and talking about good looking boys. I just love that. Yeah.
So here's what happened with me, because when I got to that part and started going in, first of all, you know, when he talks about packing all this stuff and bringing her little life jacket and her blankets and the bread ball and everything they'll need. And so, you know, you're struggling with like,
is that real or not real? Yeah.
And so I went through it and I saw, you know, all of the allusions to, you know, the Old Man in the Sea and Moby Dick and all of that. But then there's something that happened in me, and I think it's the number one is sometimes dealing with reality is so hard that you go to fantasy. That's one thing. But here's what got me and that I really liked, and that is when they were in the swashbuckling scenes, they were like this perfectly timed partnership.
Yes.
You know, you could see it. It was happening really fast, and he'd look at her and she'd do this and he'd, you know, and it's like, who else would be so on your side and so right there, knowing two steps ahead what you wanted and what a great team you would be, you know, besides you and your dog who you love so much. Like if that was a reality, who else would you pick that would be loyal and love you and fight for you? You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
So I did like that part. And I also, I liked the idea, because I think it was really ambitious of him to do that. He got a lot of flack for that part in the book. He did.
Okay.
But it was really well written.
It was. I thought so too. Yes.
So when I was able to step back and like look at it from just going to battle with your absolute best partner, companion, and you're going to be the best team ever, and you're both going to have the same, you know, drive and bravery and all of that, you know. So then when I stepped back, I was like, that's really kind of sweet.
It was sweet. That is sweet. And you know what it's making me think of? Your granddaughter, who is named after a girl in a book whose soul is an animal outside of her body, that they're the perfect companion.
Yes.
You know, yes. The Golden Compass. Yeah.
Golden Compass,
yeah. And that's what I love, that connection. And it reminded me, as you were talking, how he talked about how a dog is our best companion, a pet is our best companion, because there really is no judgment. There's no, you know, you have to do this before I love you, you know, and we as pet owners understand that. He had wonderful people relationships, some and some bad, but with a dog, with a pet, you never doubt that loyalty. Ever. I've never do. And that's why pets are so important to me, is I know that they love me. And I don't know why that is. Mom thinks there's something wrong with me, but there must be something wrong with all of us, because a lot of us feel that way.
I think most people who absolutely love animals and have experienced that kind of a relationship with a dog, a cat, whatever it is, totally get it. I mean, there's dogs, or, you know, where I live, it's so hard for me because I don't have a dog, but there are so many dogs here every day. They're everywhere. There's a dog park right down the street that I walk to and just look at the dogs.
Yeah.
You know? But there's a lot of people out there who have that very close communicative relationship with their dogs. You know, I see it all the time. I mean, I don't think it's strange at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he wrote very well about that feeling, I thought, which makes me come to he wrote very well. So of course the octopus, the reason I knew that wasn't real, the octopus left. And there was a very funny scene of how he got the octopus to leave. Do you remember going to the Chinese market and buying an octopus?
And the octopus was tasting it and like getting sick. And
yeah, no, yeah, that was hilarious. But and then it was gone the next day, and I was like, it's not gone. That's not how you get rid of tumors. And so he finally has to face that. You know, he wakes up in his bed after the adventure, and they've killed the octopus, and the octopus is still there. Yeah. And he has to face the reality of having to choose for that dog to let her go. And that was beautiful how he wrote that, didn't you think?
I did. You know, and I think all along the tumor is terrible, but she's also older. She's 12. She is. You know, and her sight is gone, and she's starting to be a little bit, I guess,
dementia. Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot of that burden on him, and his choice should be easy. That's what, you know, somebody said, you know, that's a pretty easy choice when your dog is 12 and it's got a tumor and it can't see, but it's not. No, it's not.
Because it's so weird how that creature is one of our best companions, and we get to decide to put it to sleep. You know, we don't do that with my mom. You know, rarely. You can. I mean, there's instances where that's a possibility, but so much more so with a pet, you have to do that decision. You have the choice, and it's a tough choice to make, no matter how much they're hurting. Yeah. And so many people want it to stay home and die in their arms, you know, and die at home. And sometimes that might be the right choice, you know. But he had to take her in. And so my favorite friend, I loved his friend because I want everybody to read that part that's ever had to go through it. So he takes her to the vet. He takes her to the place that did the surgery. He didn't take her to the vet he's going to. Did you notice that? Because he felt like they cared more than the vet he'd been going to. And so he takes her and he tells her why. And the staff is really good. I've done it, you know, Dr. Pascal and their staff is really good about knowing we're doing that. And there's two things. They put her to sleep, and then they do the thing that stops her heart.
Yeah, he says new tube shots.
Yeah, and then he after it's over, after she's gone, he immediately calls his friend at work, and his friend says, "I'll be home in a minute. Go to my house. I'll be there in a minute." And I was like, that is a friend who knows his buddy. Yeah. It's not just a dog. It was his family completely, because he'd left his boyfriend, and she was his only thing, and they had kind of holed up together. And it made me think of COVID, how some of us are getting to where we kind of like holing up. It's getting hard to go back out there. We're kind of like, no, I'm going to stay home with my dog. And so he
so wasn't there a name that reminded me when you said that? There was a name that the vet gave to a period of time she would go through, or a syndrome, closed world syndrome?
Yes.
What you talked about reminded me of that, just that shrinking into just that, very small circle.
That was his that wasn't his vet, that was his counselor that he made fun of. We hadn't mentioned her, but he had a therapist that he would go to every Friday. Yes, and she said he was doing that, and I could feel that during this COVID time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's too hard to get out there and make new friends. It's too hard to get out there. And yesterday was my first trip back out shopping, and we went shopping in Jackson. I kind of had fun, but a part of me was like, I'm just going to shop on Amazon, because now we can shop at home and we can do everything at home.
I know I think it's changed the way a lot of people view the outside. I mean, even still, we walk every day, twice a day in our neighborhood. And it's just still, if we're going down the street and somebody's coming toward us, somebody goes into there's just subtle little changes that have stayed. And I know it's still out there, but I've talked to more people that just feel comfortable working from home, being at home. It's like you said, a pause. This has been a big pause for a lot of people to just kind of get more quiet and more centered.
Yeah. And so it can be good. Yeah, it can be good.
Yeah.
So as he goes through his grief, as he goes through that grief about her death, does he dream about her coming back? Didn't she come back and float in the sky, or there's something about that?
Red balls come down.
Yes.
Yeah. Red balls.
Yes. And he dreams about her, and I've had dreams about my grandmother, right after she died, coming back and waving to me from a ship, as she was sailing away. And so he goes through that part of the grief, and then he had said to the dog, I think maybe I'll fall in love again. And she looked at him and said, you will. Yeah. And so later, he decides to go back out in the world, and he meets a guy that seems really, really great. Yeah. And I think the author has based it on his real boyfriend, and he feels like she's there with them, because in that, what death is about, those people we lose are always there with us.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that she had some hand in that, in getting him.
I mean, think about it this way. I've thought about this book a lot, but think about if everything that he was going through, just in his life alone, just what if he never had Lily?
Right.
It's a whole different story.
It is.
A whole different story. And I think that's, I mean, there was lessons in just from her throughout, so many, like just being in the moment, which dogs do. And
he had to remind her of who her mother was and her sister and brother, because she didn't remember, because she was in the moment. I had sisters and a mother, didn't I? It was so
sweet. But that's a really, really, really difficult thing for humans to do, is to stay in the moment. There's meditation for it. There's practices for it. It's so hard for us to do, because even in this book, he goes back and forth. He thinks about the future. He thinks about the past. He often, like going into the vets now, it brings back memories of the last time he was there. He goes back and forth a lot, but she doesn't. And I love, that's in the moment. I think that's one of the gifts that our pets give us more than anything else. I'm right here with you, right here, right now. I'm right here,
Yeah. And that, like this thing, when I pull it out to play a game, those dogs come and, and I'm like, okay, and I'm able to put it down. And just think if there wasn't a dog there, making me put that down. Yeah.
Well, he had a lot of stuff. Like, I love how he had a lot of issues. And I love how the one chapter, very short chapter, where he just lists 8 times when he was a coward. Isn't that what he does? And then one time when he was brave. But
yes,
those are very impactful. Each one of those, dealing with his homosexuality and how society treated him when he was very young, and always hating to say I love you to his mother because he's worried she wouldn't say it back. I mean, those are lifelong little
issues.
traumas that stay with us, and that relationship with Lily, you know, was never any of those, never anything like, you know, like, why did he do that? Why did he just make that little chapter with 8 times when he was brave? You know, those were hard things. Those weren't little. I mean, when he was a coward. And he wasn't a coward. He just,
Right. Yeah, he felt like it. Yes. Yeah.
he was either too young to understand, or he hadn't figured it out. But I love that part of the author, the character. And I like the fact that Lily is never, ever any of those things to him, ever. She's just right there in the moment. And to me, that was just touching and real.
Yes, yes. And the fact that there's 8, so we hadn't talked about the octopus. So the octopus, all 3, that he has it, the book's in 8 sections. You know, there's 8, there's the 8 times I was brave, or I was a coward, and all those things. And I read in the back of the book, there was a little interview with him where he talked about why he chose an octopus. I thought because it looks like an octopus. I don't know if you've ever seen like a little tumor on. I had a dog that had a tumor. It wasn't a bad one, but a big old knot on her little head that looked like octopus sitting there on top of her head. And so that was fascinating. He talked about learning so much about octopus, octopi, so that he could write it.
Yeah.
And it brings it to the end, the 3 hearts, the 3 chambers of the heart. Yeah. The octopus had 3 chambers of a heart. And so I think at the end, he sees that as a good thing. Lily and him. Was it his boyfriend was the 3rd chamber?
The new boyfriend. Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't talk a lot about, I'll tell you though, another thing I admired about his writing was that when Lily talked, it sounded like Lily all the way through. And when the octopus talked, it sounded like the octopus.
It did.
Through. He really kept those in character.
He did.
Yeah, I think the octopus's voice, I could hear it. I knew what his personality was like, you know, the facial expressions, the way he did his eyes and all that. It was really well.
He did. And I could relate to that too. I could imagine any person who had some kind of sickness, because don't they do that with children? They get children who have cancer or some kind of sickness to create like they're fighting this thing, like they can create a visual and fight it. You know, they can imagine themselves fighting it.
Okay, well that makes sense. That makes I didn't hear that, but that's cool, and it makes total sense.
I saw it in a movie or something, you know, that they got a little girl to draw a picture of what that sickness looked like so she could fight it. And that's what he was doing. He was trying to fight that octopus.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Dawn, that's our president here, and have you seen, I have not, and I need to watch it, but have you seen My Friend the Octopus?
I have not, and it's on my list.
No. And she said that it was fascinating. And I said, it kept making me think I needed to watch that. It won the Academy Award for documentary. Yeah.
I read a little bit about it, and it intrigued me, especially after reading this book or while I was reading it. You know, there was something in the paper, they were showing all the different nominees, and it gave a little bit about him, and I was like, I need to watch this now.
Yeah. And I saw the preview, and it looked fascinating because he fell in love with this octopus like we do our dogs. How is that possible? And talking about how there's more to them than we know, you know, these living creatures on earth. And that's part of what Revelation Gardens is about, is these animals. We're caretakers of them, and they're just as important as we are to our planet. And so I guess so. Is there anything you would like to add? Have we hit everything that we wanted to hit on about the book so far?
I think so. I like I said, I think it was really ambitious on his part, and I read a lot of different things about some people just didn't like it. They just couldn't get through it. They just couldn't go on that journey. You know, and I understand that, but there's not many. This was such a unique um, preface. You know, it was just so unique, and he pulled it off. I guess that's what I came away with at the end. Not only did I relate, you know, it made me think of every time I was ever with one of mine, and Jennifer Zanatti, who would come to the house, you know, because she was a vet that lived down the street. And, you know, there was always such a reverence to that time. It was never easy. It was, you know, emotional, and that struggle of should we wait, maybe not, because, you know, that's a time when we have that on us. Like you said before, we have to make that call, and it's so difficult. You know, it's so difficult. I just think that he took us on a unique journey, but in the end, I came out of it with, like, not only do I get it, but I almost get it a little better. Thank you for
sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and just sharing it in such a unique way. It's just,
and he that's one thing we didn't talk about is like forgiveness. He blamed himself for her sickness, and I think we pet owners often do that because we think, have I not fed them the right way? Have I not exercised them enough? Because they can't do it themselves. I'm the one in charge of that, and have I done this to him? And he even thought he had been the cause of her tumor. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he felt that.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, karma. It was karma. Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know, I thought about that at the beginning of the book, you know, when he says, how did I not see it? Like, how did I not see that? And he looks back at a picture and he, like, blows it up and he can see a little spot. But I have known people, and probably it's happened to me, because, you know, with my farm, how many animals? I know there's been times when I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, I missed that. I caused this animal suffering because I missed it, whatever it was, you know. So I even got that. I could relate to, all of a sudden, maybe it was big enough that it just stood out. What did you think about that? Was it just something like, oh, I just noticed it? Or was he so involved with himself for that?
Yeah.
With the breakup and all of that, which caused guilt.
Yes, yes. And the karma, see, that now I remember that word, karma. He thought he had lived such a bad life that she was suffering, because how could she have karma on her? She is a pure soul. She couldn't have karma. And so his karma was on her. And don't you know, that made me think how many family members and people who have lost anybody have felt the guilt of that, you know. Is this because I haven't been a good enough person? Why am I having to go through this thing? It can't be their fault. It has to be my fault, right? You know, so that I could relate to that too. I thought that was very good.
Yeah, like the karma thing, like you were saying, that lesson of, and I'm going back to it, but it was one of the strongest things that I came away from the book with, and that is that that idea of that we have these complicated computer minds that take us in all kinds of directions, good, bad, you know, remembering experiences, dreading the past, anticipating the future, or dreading the future, anticipating the future, memories, regrets, all of that stuff. You know, that's all in this book, really, a lot. It's just, we're going through all of that with him, but never Lily.
No.
No. So, I mean, if anything, that idea of just being in the moment, it's so difficult for us. It's so difficult for us.
Even when she went blind, you know, she didn't act like a human would. You know, she was like, oh, now I can't see, you know, as opposed to a panic. You know, he helped her, and like putting her on home base, you know, that was so sweet. But they're more accepting of their body going, you know, in a way. It's like, oh, it's time for me to go, you know.
If it's even that much thought.
Right.
But see, I don't think it is. I think it's just like you said, oh, and now it's this.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, and there's my ball.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I love her. I love her. I love dogs.
I know. What did she call Tears?
Oh yes, she would lick his the rain off his face, and that was so tasty.
Make more.
Yeah, I know. So sweet. She's so good.
I can't wait to get a dog again. And see, that's the other thing. When we take on an animal, as I'm sure in rescue, you remember I did it for years. I would always tell people it's a lifetime commitment. And two things that are not good about that is that it's their lifetime because we outlive them most of the time. So taking in these little in the moment souls, we have to know, like he even talks about it a lot. I knew she wasn't going to live as long as me. I knew it was going to be short. It doesn't make it any easier.
No.
You know?
Yeah.
But we do make that commitment with the knowledge that they're not going to be around forever. And, you know, that it's a commitment for everything that they need. It's a big deal when we take on these little creatures, you know.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the things we're going to talk about, I think, at some point, we're trying to get somebody to talk about sometimes, like when I get to be 78 years old and I need a new dog.
Yeah.
And I take him on for 12 years and I'm 78, you know, am I going to live through how long he lives? And so that's part of why Revelation Gardens was started, was she wanted to take in animals that lost their owners for that reason, like that they had died. And so she's taking them in and giving them sanctuary. So we still have to think about that too. And I've worried about that a little bit because I don't have children who would take my pets, but maybe Daniel will. Yeah.
It is true. You do have to think about that stuff. So do you actually adopt dogs out? Do you go through the process? No?
She only has 2 dogs. That's just how it's happened. She lives right where the tornado hit last year. And so they lost their fencing. So she has 2 dogs, but she mainly has cats, and we do adopt out cats because there's just so many cats. She couldn't, you know, she has a feral colony near her. There's a feral colony here by the store. There's a feral colony under my mother's house. You know, I mean, they're just everywhere. And so she's trying to get grants to spay and neuter and release, hopefully. And so we're waiting on some grants to come in, but we have a bunch of kittens right now that need to be adopted that are beautiful. I'm telling you, I can't have one. I want one so bad. And so if anybody needs a kitten, we've got one that's already called for, but we've got 5 others. And then we've got some adult cats that are absolutely wonderful.
I can't wait to have a cat again. We are still looking. So when I get back there, I will definitely be adopting.
Yay. Well, come check us out.
I will.
Yes.
I will.
So, Joann, thank you for joining us. And I loved it because you're my friend.
We should do more often. We should.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you what my next book is, and then we'll do it again.
Okay. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me, because the book I loved, and it was so nice sitting here and talking to you. I miss it.
I know. I miss you too. So let me conclude our podcast for this week. Thank you, Joann, and thank everyone for joining us today. We would also like to extend a special thanks to our sponsors, the Camden Animal Clinic and Fox Sanitation. Through their generous support, we're able to bring you this podcast each week. Remember, if you have a pet-related question, email us at revelation.gardens@gmail.com. And I think our cat, C-A-T, is somewhere around for you to look at. And if you find him, which I don't know where she put him, so I don't know where he is either. He's there somewhere. If you see him and you come in, you're going to get a little present if you tell her. And that's a way so we can just see if people are listening and if they're enjoying. I want you to come in and look. I am going to leave my copy of Lily and the Octopus here for anybody to come borrow if you would like to read it. And that concludes our podcast. Meet us next week. Same cat time, same cat channel, except dogs rule. Lily knows that. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.